All right, everyone that's tuning in here live or watching from afar. Uh, this is a smart approach to fitness after 40. I'm Dr. Will Hilton with Better with Physical Therapy, where our goal is to help you and our community feel better, move better, and live better. This conversation, this topic, kind of for us came out of a need just from conversations that we have every day. We're really that after 40, or most people after 40, they're searching for something, and they're searching for that little bit extra to keep them feeling good for their whole lives. Or maybe this is a pivotal point in your life around 40, or for well beyond 40 after. Where things are getting a little bit harder, we're feeling a little bit stiffer, not as active as we used to be, or not as able as we used to be. And you're logging on here looking for answers of why, or what can you do to help. So just to set the stage, if in the last year you've said any of those things, any of these three things, you're in the right place. So I used to be able to do this, now everything hurts. So if you're that active person who has been active your whole life, but now you're starting to notice that things are getting a little bit harder. Maybe you have these minor or major injuries, a little bit everywhere that kind of come up out of nowhere. This talk is for you. Or if you're someone that tends to start off strong or gets hurt and then just quits and stops, is not really able to gain any momentum forward, you're also in the right place. Moral of the story here is 99% of the time, these kind of fitness related injuries, issues or injuries have nothing to do with motivation. I think most people know that exercise and working out is important, but they don't really know where to start, or their approach to fitness is not as efficient as it could be. And you're not really working maybe on what you think you're working on. So as we get into this, the tale as old as time, or the myth as old as time. Age has everything to do with how we feel and what we're able to do. What we know today is that is actually not true at all. Actually, what you do in your life and how you train has everything to do with how you feel and what you're able to do. And that's evidenced kind of through our three pictures that we have on the screen here. So if we look at the first two pictures, we have first a 40-year-old triathlete. And as we kind of take a deeper dive into that picture, if we look into the center, what we can see is that nice gray area around in the middle is muscle. That is large muscle mass, with the quads being in the front there, hamstrings being in the back, kind of that cross-sectional area through this person's thigh, with that little bit of white in the middle and around the outside being adipose tissue and bone. If we move straight over to our 70-year-old triathlete, what we see is there's not much different side to side. We have this nice big area of gray, of big muscle mass, nice muscle tissue, little bit of thin adipose tissue around the outside, and obviously that bone in the middle. But when we compare that to a 74-year-old person who is sedentary or does not exercise, what we see is significant fat infiltration into that muscle and significant muscle mass loss. So we oftentimes will say, like, well, how can I have lost some muscle mass if I actually haven't lost weight, or maybe I've even gained weight? How could I have lost anything? Your body doesn't just go into empty space. Space has to turn into something. Unfortunately, muscle mass, if we're not using it, I don't know if anyone's ever heard that use it or lose it kind of concept, that muscle mass will start to develop into adipose tissue. So really what these pictures show, it has really not very much to do with age. What we're able to do and how we feel does not have to do with our age. It has all to do with how we train. But the good news is if we do train, and if we continue to train and work out and exercise across our lifespan, we're going to be able to maintain that muscle mass, which we'll get into later on, the importance of, and really why that's so important. So anytime I give these kind of talks, I like to throw this kind of continuum up on the board, just to kind of set the stage of what are we really talking about, what's at stake, and what are we working towards. So this is our sickness to wellness to fitness continuum. Essentially, everyone at some point in their lives is going to fall into one of these three categories. But in order to feel well and continue to move forward, we always want to be moving to the right. So if we kind of go category by category, we have first is our sickness zone. So that's that person with high blood sugar or diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, osteoporosis, or maybe even that older person as they're getting into their late 60s, 70s, or 80s, they're starting to see their independence decline. They're not able to do the things they used to be able to do. Maybe they're afraid or actually have a risk of falling and injuring themselves. Things like stairs become a problem. That is the person that is going to fall in our sickness zone. Again, we have to preface and we have to really self-evaluate where we're at, where if we have hypertension, for example, that is something that possibly could be managed for you through consistent exercise. If we have hypertension, I see it every day. If someone says, no, I don't have high blood pressure, I read their medication list and they're on a blood pressure medication. That still means you have high blood pressure. It's just being managed for you by a medication, not that your body has learned to adapt, learned to help itself. So if you're in that sickness zone right now, good news is this is a continuum. We obviously can move from one place to the other. Most people can live their lives very, very well in this middle wellness zone. So that's the person that has normal lab values. They're not on a lot of medications. They're very good with just general day-to-day activities. Maybe they can participate in the occasional recreational activity, play pickleball, play tennis, run a 5K maybe here and there. Really, we're in a pretty good spot when we're in this line, but it's not that easy if we're just living in this wellness zone to kind of fall into that sickness zone. If we think of it in the sense of the person that is good in their day-to-day life, they can play pickleball, tennis, maybe a racket sport, once, maybe twice a week and feel pretty good. But then their friend calls them to play in a tournament, to play an extra day of the week, and then they get hurt because their body wasn't prepared for that much load. So that's why, again, I encourage everyone that's listening in, we should always be striving towards that more fitness zone. And in that fitness zone, that's where we have that person that is very strong, capable body. They're resilient to injury, meaning something has to happen pretty much for them to become injured. They don't really have these injuries that kind of sneak up on them and come out of nowhere. They generally have better hormonal and sleep health, and they stick into their 80s and long-term into their later adulthood and older adulthood as independent, meaning they're able to live in their home. They don't have to move into an assisted living, into a nursing home, anything like that. And so in a way, we should always be striving towards more of this fitness zone and as far away from that far left in that sickness zone as we possibly can be. So again, what's at stake? What is kind of really happening in your body after the age of 40? And this is, again, if we're not training, if we're not doing much, we will actually lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade after 30. And for any of our financial people tuning in, this is essentially just like any old kind of interest. That muscle mass loss every decade after the age of 30, if we're not training, will compound on itself. So we have 3 to 8% that first year, and then it compounded on that every decade after that. So if we're starting at 30 and we never start training, what will our life, how much muscle mass will we actually have when we're 80? So again, this is just kind of painting that picture on if we do not train, if we're not consistently working out, what will actually happen over time. In addition to that muscle mass loss, people will generally also lose about 1% of their bone density. So how strong and dense our muscles are. If we're not loading our body, that will also decline year after year after year. And again, if we're going from our 30 at 100% of that bone density, and we're dropping 1% year after year, what does that really look like? What is the integrity of our skeletal structure at 80 years old if we're not kind of loading that system? On top of just general loss, if we're not training, recovery is going to take longer. Meaning, everyone has an injury that comes up at some point. If we're not training, if we're not really strong and fit, it's going to take much longer to bounce back and recover from that injury. And then, kind of on top of that, we also will notice as we get older, we would tend to be a little bit more stiffer. Takes us a lot longer to get warm, and again, that is just a lack of training. A lack of that tissue readiness to participate in the things that you like to do. But the good news is muscles respond to training at any age, meaning no matter how old you are, whether you are 30 tuning into this talk, or if you're 80 turning into this talk, muscles will always respond to the stress that you put them through. Bone density can also be maintained and built. So just like I said, just like our muscles can be built at any age, our bone density can also be improved at any age. Strength training in itself, not necessarily talking about cardio or flexibility or mobility training. Strength training on its own slows every marker that we see related to aging, related to our gait speed, our functional tolerance, how much we're able to do, are able to maintain independence into late adulthood. Strength training slows down every marker of that aging process that we see. Most of the time, it's not necessarily a do more. It's refine those things that you're already doing if you are someone who consistently works out to really be more efficient in your training and get as much out of it as you possibly can. And the best news of all is 6 months of consistency can reverse a decade of decline. So no matter what age you are, if we can just start somewhere, just build some consistency for really a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, that can literally reverse a decade of that decline that we're talking about. And again, if we go back to now, good news is if we compound that 6 months, 6 months after 6 months after 6 months, it will not take us near as long to gain what we've lost back as it did to lose it in the first place. So again, just to reiterate, what is kind of like the root? Like, where do most people go wrong? Why does this even matter? Why does being strong matter? Again, if we go back to that MRI image, we're under the understanding that it's not age, it's not necessarily age, it's more about how much muscle mass, what is my body's overall capacity, then we can kind of understand more and kind of come to a more realistic understanding of why injuries, pain actually happens. Again, 90% of the time, it's not because you have arthritis. It's not because you have some kind of degenerative change going on, because honestly, those are pretty normal and they're very, very common within an aging population. And again, all comes down to how much capacity does my body have for this task, for this activity that I'm asking it to do. Meaning, if I kind of put myself into two different buckets, if I'm asking myself of a lot, so if my demand is really high, think about those higher level activities that you might like to do, but my body's capacity is on the lower end, then I might could expect that I'm at risk for pain, for injury, for those maybe more degenerative or common changes with aging to be a problem. Versus if my capacity is very, very high, in comparison or in relation to what I'm asking of myself, then I'm pretty good. I'm at very, very low risk for injury, very, very low risk for pain. So I like to put this in perspective of if I can squat a lot of weight, then I wouldn't really expect going up and down the stairs to cause any pain on my knee, right? If my legs are really, really strong, I really wouldn't maybe notice if there was a problem until I'm doing something close to what that really, really heavy squat that I'm able to do would be, not something like going up and down the stairs. So again, it's not that the stairs are the problem. It's not that the age has just made the stairs be a bad thing for you. I'm just using stairs as an example, obviously. It all has to do with what your body is prepared to do at that point in time. So where to start, and like what really matters, and what all goes into this idea of kind of wellness and longevity. First and foremost, the most important thing, and this is not for anyone tuning in that knows me, this is not just my biased opinion. This kind of is what it is. Strength is the uh, first and foremost most important aspect of any training plan, any program that I would ever develop for anyone. Uh, under the understanding that we were thinking in the long term, your long term health, your long term wellness, and really longevity and maintaining your independence over time is your strength. I think maybe a few decades ago there was the jogging and the cardio and the aerobic fitness kind of phase, and what we've kind of seen is even those people with really excellent cardiovascular fitness, they still get hurt, and they still get hurt a good amount, whether it's with running or whether it's with other things, and that really is because despite their really good cardiovascular fitness, their strength tends to be poor because that is just not a system that they stress that often. Uh, or on the flip side, we hear that person that didn't think or didn't understand that running is not actually making you any stronger. It's not moving the needle forward to develop muscle, to improve muscle mass. Not to say that it's a bad form of exercise. It's obviously on my top 6 list and things to focus on here, but it is not that kind of preserving factor that's going to maintain your longevity in the long term. But it is second. It's a close second, meaning it's not that it's not important, but it's nowhere near as important as general strength training. So when we look at how much strength training we really should be doing, it's got to be 2 or 3 times a week. And I generally put it in perspective of 2 times a week is enough to make really small gains over a really long period of time. If we're looking to make a change at any time in the near future, it really needs to be more that 3, maybe even 4 times a week. We're looking at compound lifts and progressive load over time. So no matter where we're starting from, we should always be looking to gradually progress that load over time. And just like I said, this is kind of our non-negotiable foundation. Meaning, if we're not doing strength training, we can't really expect to feel well into later adulthood. No matter how much running, aerobic training we're doing, mobility, stretching, balance training, we can't really expect to feel good if we're not doing some kind of consistent strength training. Like I said, that aerobic base is important, but what we've kind of found out is it's more about being in that zone 2, which is like that mid-tier of heart rate where you're a little out of breath, but you can still kind of have a conversation with the person beside you. Maybe that's more of like a brisk walk versus going to run a 5K. That is generally enough aerobic training to keep us at least in that wellness zone that we were talking about earlier. Doing some kind of mobility training is also important. Good news is if you're doing strength training, you're doing more free weight kind of exercises. You're kind of already training your mobility with that stuff. And where I tell most people to focus is this should not necessarily replace any of these other training components that we do. This can be done as just like your warm up before you would go and do your strength work. Balance is kind of another underrated pillar. Obviously, the better your balance is, the less risk of falls you might have into your later 70s and 80s. It is kind of a support system for the rest of your body, but also same thing as we said with mobility. Good news is if you're doing some kind of consistent strength training, that is also going to make improvements in your balance. Nutrition obviously is another important component. Most people as they get older actually don't eat near enough. I think whether they're actually overweight or not, I would say 75% of the older adults that I see, whether they're trying to lose weight or not, they're really not eating enough. If we're not eating enough, then our body goes into more of a starvation mode. It will start to hold on to the things it feels like it needs. And the other side of it is actually your muscle is the most efficient way for your body to get energy. So in a kind of a graphic way to say it, your body will actually start to eat your muscle a little bit to give it energy to move throughout your day. So with that, to decrease that, we want to make sure we're eating adequate amounts and especially adequate amounts of protein. Uh, Generally speaking, and I think if everyone can do the math, you're thinking you want to be somewhere in that zero point 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of your body weight. Again, you can do the kind of math for yourself if you're tuning in. If we kind of put it in context, somewhere like apps like MyFitnessPal, just a quick Google search, you can start to get a good gauge on how much protein you're already taking in your day and then adjust accordingly. But protein is at least that most important foundation for muscle preservation and avoiding that loss of muscle mass with age. Sleep is also a non-negotiable, especially if we're someone that trains often. Our body needs that time to recover. Again, that general recommendation is somewhere in that 6 to 8 hour range per night. But again, that is very dependent on you as a person. If you feel refreshed at 5 or 6 hours of sleep, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need 9. But just keep in mind that sleep is very, very important, and more of just that consistency in your sleep routine and getting adequate amounts for you. So strength training. This is kind of for anyone, again, tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or later on. This is your cheat sheet. And if you're logged on now, there will be a follow-up email with kind of this information provided in just handout form. But this is kind of generally what we're speaking. So if anybody tuning in on their phone wants to take a quick screenshot here, just so you have it. When we're thinking about what is this strength training, what do we really need to be doing in the gym? This is just a basic lift. And this is kind of the simplest way I have to kind of break it down for people on what they actually should be doing. When we think about upper body movements or how do we develop our upper body strength, we're really looking at some kind of pushing movement. And those, just for example, would be push-ups, dumbbell bench or barbell bench presses, overhead pressing, incline pressing, landmine pressing, really anything that we're pushing with our upper body. The next upper body component would be more of a pull, where we're looking at a dumbbell row, lat pull down, pull aparts with the band, rows with the TRX straps. I could go on forever. Some kind of pulling movement. We're trying to mix into that, like I said before, 2 or 3 times a week. For our lower body, we have hinging, squatting, and lunging. Our hinging kind of movements are our Romanian deadlifts, kettlebell deadlifts, good mornings, hip thrusts, bridges, single leg RDLs. Squatting, same idea, goblet squats, box squats. Again, these lists could go on. And in the nuance of it, as long as we're doing some kind of movement in each of these categories, which one it is doesn't necessarily matter as much as that we're doing it. Of course, there is some specificity to what we do. Maybe if you are a tennis player or a pickleball player, someone who plays pickleball or tennis a good amount, we might want to focus more on some lateral movements, which maybe we pick a lateral lunge just so our body is prepared for that kind of movement. If we're someone who works in our garden often, maybe we're bending over a lot, pulling a lot of weeds, or we have that coming up, we want to make sure we're prepared. Maybe we need to focus a little bit more on hinging kind of movement so our body is prepared under load to pick and pull things off the ground. And then as far as like our core work, grip training, if we're carrying heavy things often, whether that's a farmer's carry, suitcase carry, carrying weights over our heads, we just need to be stressing our core and or grip in some way as well. Again, that is at the end that is the last section or last category for a reason. It is probably the least important in comparison to the first 5. But again, that is just another component that we want to make sure we're hitting again 2 or 3 times a week. So how heavy, right? This is something we get all the time. What is enough? There's 2 different kind of ways we kind of can measure is this strength training that I'm putting in, is this load enough to really make change? Method number 1, which is probably not realistic for most people, is deciding how much weight to do for that day based on a percentage of your 1 rep max. So the 1 rep max literally means, let's say take squatting, for example, how much weight could I put on myself and squat 1 time, not be able to do any more, absolutely no more reps. And to be in that strength and power development mode, or kind of to build muscle mass, we really need to be in that 70 to 90% of what that 1 rep max would be. And really, we're thinking somewhere in the 4 to 12 rep range. But within that rep range, if you get to the end and you can think to yourself, I really could have done 5, 6, 7 more, 10 more, 15 more reps, it's not heavy enough. And I think we see this more often than not of people are going to the gym and maybe they're doing some machine work, they're doing some weights, but it is just not enough load to produce any stimulus to your body and actually develop or maintain muscle mass. Again, I kind of have this conversation often. If you're that person that does a little bit of resistance training, but it's not heavy enough, and you get to the end of your set and you had 10 reps more in the tank, I don't really have a nicer way to say it. You're not really doing much, meaning you're not being efficient in your time, and you're not really building that equity in yourself and in your muscle mass that you should be. Then if we flip over, the other way we can kind of measure exertion, or are we having enough load, that's probably a little bit more realistic for most people, is RP. So that's the rate of perceived exertion. And again, to be in that ideal working set, we should be somewhere in that 7 to 8 range to really be in that muscle building zone. So you can think of it as in a 0 to 10 scale, meaning like the effort I just put in, if 10 out of 10 means I absolutely couldn't do any more lift, I couldn't lift any more weight, that maybe for a beginner is not a good place to start. But maybe a better place to start is somewhere in that 5 to 6 to 7 range, where you feel like that's 7 out of 10 effort. When you finish that set, it wasn't to failure, but maybe you only had 3 or 4 reps left in the tank. That is adequate enough to build muscle. That is adequate enough to build and really maintain our muscle mass over a long period of time. If we're getting to the end of that set and it was a 3 out of 10 effort, I could have done 10, 15 more reps. That really should have just been your warm-up set. It's not enough load, again, to create adaptation, to create change, and really move that needle forward for you. So again, if you are tuning in, you can take a quick screenshot of this page. It's just like your general reminder of how much load you should be doing in these strength training sessions. So big takeaways. Pain and injury are not the same. Pain is really a signal to your body that your demand and your capacity are mismatched, meaning the job that you're doing at that time, the task, the sport, the activity that you're participating in, your body is not prepared to undergo that load. So our whole goal with any training program, with any physical therapy, with any rehab, is to build someone's capacity well beyond the demands of their sport or whatever activities that they enjoy to do or they need to get back to. If you're already working out and you're that person that every time I squat, I have this problem with my knee, it doesn't mean that squatting is bad for you. It just means either we have poor form on it, or we need to modify it in some way, meaning that movement for you at that point in time is not right. We need to either slow down the tempo, modify the load, change the range, modify how low in that squat you're going, for example. We need to change it in some way because you need to be able to do that pattern. Strength training is the number one tool after 40 to maintain our wellness and maintain our longevity. Consistency over a long period of time will always beat really heavy loads and really high intensity now. But again, remember, in the long term, you do need to make sure we are gradually progressing load over time to really make sure we are continuing and constantly stimulating those muscles for growth and to maintain their density. And you're not too old. You're not too old. You just need to train smarter. You need to make sure you're doing the right things to maintain the activity that you want to do. Where to start? Really, we're trying to make sure we hit 2 or 3 strength training sessions a week, primarily focusing on squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, and lunging, and then filtering in, again, that core work or grip training as we go along or as we're able. We're looking for 3-ish brisk walks per week. Zone 2, meaning you are a little bit out of breath, but I could still have that conversation with someone beside me. Focus on hitting those protein goals. So again, somewhere in that 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of your body weight. If you don't know what that really means, I encourage you to download MyFitnessPal, check the nutrition facts on the back of your foods when you're eating, and just check. Track it for a day, track it for a week. You'll get a really good gauge on where you're at. I'm not necessarily someone that says you need to track all the food that you eat all the time, but to just get a general gauge of how much you're actually taking in, sometimes that can be enlightening. And then prioritize sleep. That's where really gains and recovery happens, is when we're actually resting at night. Again, thank you all for tuning in. If anybody wants to throw any questions into the chat, please do so. See, Pat a few minutes ago asked, is BMI a good way to know if you are eating enough? BMI is going to be a tough way to track if you're eating enough. BMI, if you are someone who is a little larger framed, may not be a good indicator on actually what you should be eating. And also someone who actually already has pretty good muscle mass, their BMI is going to be skewed. I kind of usually, if someone is trying to maybe lose weight, then their amount of nutrients that they should be taking in should really be based on what that maybe goal weight should be, within reason, obviously. But BMI is not really necessarily a good way to decide like what you actually should be eating. It should either be that goal or what your actual weight is at that point in time. Again, if there's anyone else that wants to throw a question into the chat, I'm more than happy to answer it now. Like I said, thank you all again for tuning in. Those who are online or those that are watching this later on, I will send out a follow-up later on today or tomorrow with kind of all this information in a concise handout, just so you have something tangible and a reference to refer back to. If you are someone who is watching this or tuning in later and still doesn't know where to start, that is where we as physical therapists come in. Where we can come in, we can test your strength, we can help you identify maybe areas where you were having problems, and really I help you kind of gauge where your training should focus. If you're also someone that has a full understanding and understands that you need to exercise and you need to get started, but you don't know where, we also offer personal training services. We offer those in online remote formats, and we also offer those in in-person training sessions as well. And if you're someone who maybe has never worked out before, sometimes that in-person training might be a better way to start, just so you kind of can get a gauge on what stuff is supposed to feel like and how much load you actually should be using. That way you're starting efficient and staying efficient in the long term. Again, I'm going to give it a few more seconds for any of those last minute questions before we log off here. Again, this presentation will be available moving forward in just our online format here. And again, like I said, we will send out that more concise handout and information later on. Awesome. All right, well, we are going to tune off here. Again, log back in here later, watch the session again, keep a lookout for that handout coming out, and thank you all again for tuning in.